Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Judy Blake, and I am in Houston, Texas, with the wonderful organization called Family to Family Network. I just want to introduce two of my colleagues, Leslie Lawson. Some of you may know Leslie.
Hi, everybody.
And Leonella Castillo. She is bilingual. I can only aspire to be bilingual, Leonella, because it's not happening anytime soon. So we're going to talk about today placement and least restrictive environment. Oh, hold on, Leonella, you're going a little bit too fast for me. And this is really important because we never want our kids to be segregated all the time. I mean, they might need to be in a smaller class and be in a life skills class or in a special education, receiving special education services. But we, to the extent possible, really want them to be with their peers because everybody learns much more from each other when we're all together. Next slide, please. So I really love this picture because I think it really sums up all students and especially our students. Every student can learn, just not on the same day or in the same way. And I think that really speaks to all of us because everyone learns differently. I'm very visual. I'm not necessarily an auditory learner. Sometimes something has to be repeated to me twice. And our students are the same way. With or without disabilities, everyone learns differently. And sometimes you might have to hear something a few times in order for it to click. The purpose of this meeting is to review IDEA and having a vision. We're going to talk about considering inclusion and least restrictive environment, and we're going to share some resources with you. So there's a lot of information. You are not expected to know everything, I promise you. Oh, hold on. I just got something real quick. Oh, yes, this is the same meeting. We have discussed it before. It was about a year ago, Aileen. So I'm not sure.
It was in 2022, I think.
Oh, yeah, then this is a different one, Aileen. Yeah, I think this is a different one.
Is this
Thank you for.
because I came to one of the meetings about family networking already, so I was just wondering if that's connected to the same, like, is there just different schedules for this meeting?
Yes, so I think this is a different presentation, but we do one a month and we've been doing it for a few years now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and this is just a different topic. But this particular topic was only presented once before, like almost 2 years ago.
Oh, okay.
So we're revisiting it.
Oh, okay.
So next slide, please. So many thanks to our sponsor. This program would not be possible without their support. Many thanks to Aetna Better Health of Texas. Next slide, please. So for those of you that are on this webinar, it's really important to remember that everything that we are talking about is the law, and it is IDEA. And if you're not familiar with that term, it means Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. And what that does is it ensures that children with disabilities, we want to make sure that they have what we call a free, appropriate public education. And in special education, they love their abbreviations. And the abbreviation for that is called FAPE, F-A-P-E. And what that does is that it emphasizes special education and related services. And we want to make sure that that special education and related service is designed to meet the unique needs of each student. So what Leslie had for her son would be different than what I had for my son, which is different than what Leonella has for her son. It needs to be unique, and it also needs to prepare them for further education, employment, and independent living. And I realize that if you're on this call and your child is 8 years old, 12 years old, you're thinking, I can barely make it through the school year, let alone think of what's going to happen when they graduate. We understand that. We just want to make sure that parents always have a vision for their child, and that vision can change from year to year. We also want to make sure that parents or caregivers presume competence for their children. No child ever rises to low expectations, and that includes all of us. So you want to make sure that while your vision may change for your child and their vision may change for themselves, the purpose of IDEA is to make sure that they are being prepared for that post-secondary education, employment, and independent living. Next slide, please. So when we talk about having a vision, that can mean different things to different people. What we don't want is our kids graduating to the living room couch. We never want that. In our opinion, that's really not what we call a meaningful life. So it's important that when your loved one graduates, that maybe they do volunteering, and that's wonderful. I love volunteering. I think it's great. I think that everyone can do something to give back to the community. It's just a matter of tapping in to find out what it is that they can volunteer at. Maybe you have a child that wants to pursue college. There are so many college programs today. My son is going to be 30 in March, and I also have a 33-year-old. 10, 15 years ago, there wasn't nearly as much as there is today. Maybe your son or daughter wants to pursue some type of vocational program or a trade school. I think that can be great as well. And then there's always employment opportunities. Next slide, please. So when we talk about, again, having a vision for your child, on the left-hand side, there is my son, Ryan, with his mentor and supervisor. He works part-time in a restaurant, and he works during the day doing food prep. He has been there now over 2 years. I am very proud of him. He also participates in a social skills program on Mondays and Fridays. Yes, I believe he still spends way too much time on the computer and watching TV, which is something that I'm always working on. He loves dogs. He's just like me, his mom. So you can see there was a picture of him at a shelter, and it's just so sweet. You almost think he's talking to the dog, the way he's looking at him and the dog's looking at him. It's really precious. On the right-hand side, our executive director, Mary Jane Williams, that is her son, Christopher. And I love this picture because I love Christopher and I love his shirt. Yes, I can. When you're thinking about your child, you always want to, see, what is it that they have in far as hopes and dreams. Maybe they don't know. Maybe it needs some discussion. I think that sometimes our loved ones need some encouragement and to explore and try different things. What are they going to do when school is finished? What is the school preparing your loved one for? We know that it's supposed to be post-secondary education and employment and independent living, but where are they going to go after school is finished? We don't want to be thinking about that when they turn 18 and they're about to graduate, or if they stay in school, technically with the ARD committee decision, and if there's a plan and reasons for them to stay, they can stay through age 21. So it's important to know that not everyone has to graduate at 18, but there has to be a reason for them to stay. And what steps is it going to take for your loved one to achieve those hopes and dreams? Next slide, please. So some of you have probably already seen this before. The reason that we bring it up is because it's really, really important. If the school is working with you to provide, the best placement for your child, if they have evaluated your child, please know that all of the decisions made about your child are made with you in mind. You are an important part of the ARD committee, and you have to agree to it. It's not as though the school can say, okay, mom, we have evaluated your child and we believe they should be in this program or this program. It needs to be an ARD committee decision. So what the school does is they are collecting data. They complete a full individual evaluation. And then once that's done, they're looking at the present levels of academic performance. And from that, goals and objectives are created. Again, unique to your son or daughter. What supplementary aids and services can be given to your child in order for them to be successful? And we're going to talk about those in a little bit. Last but not least is placement. And placement can be multiple locations. For my son, sometimes he needed a quieter environment because the classes were so big. So there were times that he was receiving special education services. There were times when he was in a co-teach class. And then there were times when he was in a general education class. So there can be a mixture. It's not as though your child can be in one place or has to be in one place all day, and that's it. I think that schools can be creative and parents can too. The more that you know as a parent, the more you will be valued and respected as a member of the ARD committee. And once schools realize that you know your rights, they will definitely respect you more. Parents should be respected at all times anyway, but when you know your rights, I think it puts a little bit different spin on it. Leslie's going to go over the remaining slides. I do have a quick question though, beforehand. Hello, Majid. And Diana, can you either private message me or unmute yourself so I know your last name, because there's lots of Dianas in my database.
Oh, hi, it's Deidre. Deidre Nolan Jones.
Oh, hey Deidre, how are
yeah,
you?
I'm on my phone. I was having trouble on my computer, so I had to.
No problem. Okay, so if you could make sure that your picture is shown, that would be great.
Okay, no problem.
Lourdes and Brenda, may I ask your last name, please?
Guzman?
Guzman? Oh, that's right. How are you?
Good, how are you?
Thank you so much. And
my last name too?
I'm sorry?
You want my last name too?
You gave it to me, Guzman?
No, I'm Med. Med? M-A-G-I-D? Yeah.
Oh, M-A-G. Okay, I'm sorry. I couldn't hear very well. I don't know how I came up with the other. Thank you so much, Brenda.
No, Brenda
no,
Guzman.
No. Yeah, Brenda, that's
You're
her
confusing
name.
two people.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
Brenda Guzman.
Oh, it is Brenda Guzman. Okay, that's what I thought.
You're right.
Okay, my apologies.
Okay.
And let me just clarify before we continue. We have a Lourdes Torres and a Lourdes Martinez. Is that correct?
Yes, correct.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. I think that was everybody. Perfect. Leslie, why don't you go ahead now? Sorry about that.
Do you know who the one is that just says iPhone?
Oh, good question. iPhone, can you tell me who you are, please? Unless that is Deidre because Diana is, no, that's a different one. Let me try and send a message to iPhone to see who they are. And
Okay.
I will work on that. Thank you so much, Leslie.
Okay, all right. Next slide, please. So personally, I think that least restrictive environment is one of the most important requirements of the IDEA law. And, it's like Judy said, it's going to look different for every student. But basically what it says on the left of the screen, that's the law, but we kind of broke it down on the right into easy to understand terms. It says that as much as possible, your child is taught with kids who don't have disabilities and is taken out of regular education and put in special classes only if your child's disability is so severe that with all the supports and services available, supplementary aids and services, they can't make appropriate progress in the general education setting. And so just to tell you a little bit about my son, he's an adult now, but when he has autism and he has an intellectual disability, when he was little, he was pretty much nonverbal. He would have meltdowns. He was a runner. He would kick and bite and not want to do any type of work. So that just kind of gives you a background, because I just want everybody to see that everybody deserves to be in the least restrictive environment. But I will say it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work to get it right in the paperwork and then to make sure the follow through in the class is right, because inclusion done wrong can be worse than a segregation. So just remember, special education is a service and placement is where that special education service is going to be delivered. So just keep that in mind. Next slide. In order to be included in the least restrictive environment, it's really important that we have appropriate supplementary aids and services. So you don't want to just leave a kid in regular ed without any supports and services and accommodations if they're needed for them to make progress in that environment. So we want to make sure they have everything they need to be successful in the least restrictive environment. And in the spirit of the law, you always want to start out in general ed with all the supports and services available, and then only if the student is not making progress would they be moved to a more restrictive setting. And it can be a combination, and this does also apply to preschool age students. A lot of times there's not as many choices on the campus. You might, like some students preschool age, they may go to regular pre-kindergarten and have special ed support in that location, or maybe they go to a private preschool and they get their speech therapy or OT therapy at the public school campus. So there's a lot of different ways to do it. We have to get creative and think outside of the box. And I think it's, like Judy said, it's hard to think when your child is young about life after high school, but everything you do now puts you on a path. And if a student is in a segregated environment their whole life, how can you then expect them to live in our community? For me, our vision was for Cameron to be educated with his same age peers, with the neighborhood kids on his home campus, and get the supports he needs to do that. And because we didn't want him to grow up and then the only option would be for him to live in the state supported living center in an institution. I wasn't raising him for that. So just keep that in mind. So some supplementary aids and services I have a whole long list in the slides that y'all can look over, and you can definitely ask for the slide deck and the recording afterwards. If you would like, just email Judy. But I want to just kind of hit on some of them, that in order to have appropriate support in regular ed and special ed placements, most students are going to need some supplementary aids and services. They're probably going to need some accommodations. Maybe they're going to need therapies like speech, OT, PT. Maybe they're going to need some assistive technology, maybe a voice output device. It could be teacher training, support for the staff. All of these things are supplementary aids and services. In-class support, like my son had a lot of paraprofessional support by a trained paraprofessional in order for him to be able to be included in the regular education class. And another reason I think it's really important is when they're in that regular education class, the bar is set higher. They're going to have appropriate speech models, social skills models, behavior models, and just a lot more is going to be expected of them. So that's one thing I see all the time. Like if a student is in a very segregated setting, they may not have those role models. And so maybe they start copying the behaviors or whatever of the other students in the class. So that's one reason why it's important. Next slide. So some other things could be like modifications, like where they're going to sit in the classroom. Maybe they need to sit up front. I remember when Cameron was in, I believe it was second grade in the regular education class, he had a great regular education teacher that really took ownership of him, even though he had paraprofessional support. And a lot of times when they were doing circle time, she had him sitting right in front of her or right next to him so she could keep him engaged. And she really saw the value of having students with disabilities in her class, and that she moved up to third grade and requested to have Cameron again because it made such a difference for the regular education students also, because they learned about people with disabilities, because there are a lot of people with disabilities when we're grown, and we want to have our regular ed students to have compassion and know how to give support to people with disabilities that maybe they work with or in the community with. A lot of times, if your student's going to be in regular education, another supplementary aid and service could be extra planning time for the regular ed teacher and the special ed teacher to collaborate and plan. Maybe a student needs, we talked a little bit about special equipment, or maybe an accessible bathroom or an augmentative communication device. Maybe they need more breaks, or maybe they need a set of materials to go home so mom and dad can get them ready for and practice with them so they know what to expect the next day. Just anything you can think of that allows them to be educated in the least restrictive environment. They may need like if they're older, they may need a hard copy of notes. Maybe they can't take notes. Maybe they need somebody in there that's able to do sign language, just different things like that. Maybe they need a peer buddy to read to them in order for them to answer questions about, to show what they've learned. Next slide. These are just some more examples. Some of them I probably already said because I don't really go in order that well. Definitely testing adaptations. Maybe their curriculum is modified and they're not responsible to show that they know the the full amount of curriculum. Maybe they only have 5 vocabulary words or 10 spelling words, or maybe they copy the spelling words while the other kids are doing their spelling test. So it's all about being present in the classroom and doing something, the same thing the other kids are doing, but on their level. There also may be training needed for the staff, for the paraprofessionals, and for the teachers. I know several of Cameron's teachers went to the Inclusion Works conference, which was great, and then they were able to bring that information back to the campus and share it with everybody else on their campus. Next slide.
Leslie, if I could just add, I think that when our kids are in school, we think, oh, they need to be with all kids who have disabilities. And last time I checked, there was no HEB just for people with disabilities. There was no movie theater just for people with disabilities. There might be a sensory-friendly performance, but it's not as though the entire theater, when you go to Walmart, when you go to Target. And for some reason, when it comes to learning, we think, oh, let's segregate. And in some cases, that's okay. But in other cases, our kids benefit so much from seeing other students that are typically developing. And like Leslie so beautifully said, the typically developing students benefit so much from being with our kids who might need more supports and services.
So general education is always the goal. So they may be in general education with maybe just some accommodations and not need a whole lot of supports. Maybe they need, they're in general education with a lot of supplementary aids and supports, maybe a lot of accommodations. Some students, like my son, he had curriculum modifications. He wasn't responsible to show understanding of every curriculum, all the TEKS that the typical kids were. And he was pulled out, don't get me wrong. There were times he didn't get a lot from large group instruction. And so that was the time when the trained para took him out and worked one-on-one on some very specific goals in his IEP. It could be that some students go to resource for their math and reading language arts. But maybe they go to general ed. I do always like, if a student's going to be included and there's a homeroom, for them to always go to their homeroom class, because that's the class they're going to go to lunch with, go on field trips with, go to music, PE, and all of those things. So you really want them to be a member of that class. Then there's a self-contained class, like maybe life skills or maybe adaptive behavior class, or in some districts, they have special autism classes. I know in Katy, they have the comprehensive autism classes. Those are self-contained, but they don't have to be in there for every minute of every day. There are also separate schools. Most of our school districts have campuses that maybe have some specialized and specially trained teachers, like in Cy-Fair. I know we have the Dorothy Carlton Center. I can't remember the name of the campus in Katy, but they have, if a student can't be served on their home campus due to behaviors or due to like medical issues, sometimes they'll have a separate school within the district. It's still it's still within the district though. And then there are also residential placements. If the school is not able to provide a free and appropriate education in any of those settings, the school may pay for a residential setting. Some of the instructional arrangements could be mainstream. A lot of times they use inclusion, mainstream. Also, some students may need a homebound setting. I know Leonella's son is homebound right now due to some medical issues. So the teacher goes to the home. If a student is in a hospital for a long period of time, the teacher may need to go there. Of course, we have resource. Sometimes there's co-teach where you have a regular ed teacher and a special ed teacher that work together in one classroom. You have life skills, adaptive behavior, vocational classes. And then also, like when they get older, the 18+ program in the district would serve students that have they're over 18, but they still have things to work on to prepare them for life for whatever it is that they want to do after high school, whether it be a college program or a college program for people with disabilities, employment, or in my son's case, getting into a good day program. My son goes to an adult day program. They're not all created equally. They don't have to take students. So you want to make sure that the school prepares them to get into whatever, of course, realistic placement they want to go to after they're exited out of high school or after they graduate. And I know Judy mentioned that they could stay in school through their 21st year. So like my son didn't turn 22 until January. So he was able to go ahead and do that full year. But they're not going to let you stay if you don't have things to work on. So you want to keep that in mind. Next slide. So I wanted to mention too, placement decisions should not be based on certain things. And I'm just going to kind of go over some of those things. Placement decisions should not be based on administrative convenience. It shouldn't be based on last year's placement decision. It shouldn't be based on what the existing programs and settings that the school has. It shouldn't be based on lack of support or resources or space or lack of training for the teachers. So what that means, if your student needs it to make appropriate progress in the general education class, they can't just say, oh, we don't have anybody to support your student to do that. Or, oh, we don't have the money. They can't say that. They have to figure that out. So just keep that in mind. So a lot of times parents will tell me that the school says, oh, we don't do that here. Well, they don't get to just do what they want to do. They have to follow the IDEA law. And that's why it's so important for you guys to be familiar with that. So these are some of the things we've really kind of talked about. Modified curriculum, different ways to grade the student, alternate assignments, adaptive materials, or maybe there are some students that are in special ed and they're doing the same thing. They're in a regular education class and they just have some minor accommodations, but they're required to do the same things as the same age typical peers in that classroom are. So it can look very different and it doesn't have to be all or nothing. And you can get really creative if you work with the school. Next slide. And so this is kind of the continuum of placement. And there's lots of combinations and in between, regular ed all the way to homebound hospital or residential facilities. And like I said, it could be a mixture of all of those. Next slide. In your IEP, there's a schedule of services page. Everybody should pay attention to that. You want your IEP to be as very as specific as possible, because like in the class earlier today, one of the moms was saying that my student only has 30 minutes of in-class support. Well, that's something the mom must have agreed to. So you want to ask questions. Who, what, when, where, how, what's that going to look like? Speech therapy, is it one-on-one? Is it in a group? How many are in the group? Is it pull out, or are they going to come into the class some of the time to facilitate transferring those skills that they learned in isolation into a normal setting, a regular setting. But if you look at your schedule of services page, you're going to have numbers like these are the instructional arrangement codes, and it's that kind of determines how much money the school gets for each student. Not that you have to worry about that, but a lot of times I find that parents don't really know what their child's instructional arrangement is. They think, oh, my kid's included for the full day, and maybe they're not. So you want to be familiar with these codes and make sure that goes along with what you and the ARD committee have discussed is supposed to happen and what it's going to look like in the classroom. And that's why I always encourage parents to try to go up and observe their student. There are good general ed classes and not so good general ed classes. And the same goes for all the other settings. You just want to make sure your student is getting what they need. And there's nothing wrong with having to get some of your special ed services in a self-contained class, as long as they're really teaching them stuff, teaching them the curriculum. It could be a modified curriculum, but they're not just babysitting. Because remember, every year that they're not learning the same thing as the other kids, they fall further behind. So a lot of times the schools will say, oh, well, let's start here, and then they'll work their way out. Okay, I don't see that happening a whole lot. Because once they're in there, that's what they get used to. They're not exposed to the same curriculum. The expectations aren't as high. So if you can try to start in the least restrictive environment with all the supports and services that would help your child, then it's not like they're trying to claw their way out of a self-contained class. Next slide. One other thing, I'm looking at another document that I'm going to give to y'all that I think is very helpful. It's a question and answer document on least restrictive environment. And it's an old document, but I really like it because it puts everything in easy to understand terms, and it asks questions and then it gives the answer. So the ultimate goal for all of our kids is for students to live, learn, work, and participate in their community. And so we want to keep that in mind. My husband has a cousin that her mom died when she was very young, and she was always in a very segregated setting all through school. And then, of course, the only place for her to go because of that was in a very segregated environment once she aged out. And I think about, she had so many skills, because I would see her on the holidays. If she would have had access to the same opportunities that my son had to be included with in the least restrictive environment, her outcome may have been very different. So you definitely want to know what percentage of the day your child's included and what percentage of the day they're in whatever other setting they're in, and what kind of support and who's providing that support. Is that person trained? So just be aware of all that. I think we tend to take a lot of things for granted and don't, even when things are going great, don't take things for granted, because that's when all of a sudden something's going to come up. Next slide. And just remember that in schools, in class, the regular ed class, there's a lot of different kinds of learners, even with the students who are not receiving special education services. So everybody needs a little something different, and good teachers are good at making sure that each student is provided with what they need to learn. Plus, it allows for kids to see that all the kids learn differently. You don't want your child just plopped in regular education with no supports, because that's not going to be meaningful. So keep that in mind. When you go in and observe, you'll see a lot. Like, I've gone in before, or I've had parents go in before, and maybe the student has paraprofessional support, and maybe that para that is supposed to be helping their student is working with other students, and their students not getting what they need, or maybe the paraprofessional's doing too much for them, or maybe the paraprofessional sitting in the back of the room. But we also want the regular education teacher to take ownership of the student also. These are a couple of good books that you can check into, and sometimes reading about it can be helpful. Next slide. So we know, if you've taken part in any of our trainings, you know a lot about these resources. The IDEA handbook helps you learn the special education process. Our website, Texas Project First, does too. It puts everything in very parent-friendly terms. One we haven't mentioned before might be the Inclusion in Texas, if you want to learn more about inclusion in least restrictive environment. Next slide. So this is the document that I was telling you about, the least restrictive environment question and answer document, and you'll see that it was revised back in 2016. So it's really dated, but if you go to it, that's the link there to the right where it says ESC 19. That's one of our education service centers. Each education service center kind of specializes in something, and Region 19 is the one that was specializing in least restrictive environment. One education service center might specialize in assistive technology or learning disabilities like dyslexia or dysgraphia. So this document, I just really love it because it has questions and then easy to understand answers to help you participate in your child's ARD meeting and really be informed about least restrictive environment. Earlier today at the other training, there was a parent who had moved here from, I believe, the up northeast, where they tend to include children with disabilities more frequently. And her son has Down syndrome. And when they got here, the first thing they wanted to do is place her son, who was flourishing in regular ed with support up there. They wanted to put him in a life skills class. And she was trying to figure out what to do. And just a reminder that you are a very important of the ART committee, and that IEP document is a legal document. And at the end of the meeting, you have to agree or disagree. You want to make sure you understand the whole document and you know what you're agreeing to. And you want to make sure that you know what to do if you do disagree. Of course, we want to work together with the school to resolve issues, but you have to know what to do if you disagree. And a lot of times, if you do disagree, that's when things get worked out, because then they know you know your rights. And I know it shouldn't be that way, and not that you're going to disagree about every little thing, you know, but if it's something very important um, for your child, definitely you can use your procedural safeguards. That's complaints, mediation, and due process. If you disagree at an ARD meeting, they're going to have a 10-day or more recess, and then you can decide to make it more than 10 days, but that's kind of the default. But like if you're going to have extra evaluations done, or if you're going to have an independent evaluation done at the school's expense because you disagreed either on the evaluation or on the services that they're wanting to provide that were based on that evaluation, you may need longer than 10 days, or maybe there's various reasons it could be longer than 10 days, but you would come to an agreement about when you're going to come back. Hopefully, when you come back, everybody's going to bring more information to support what they're wanting to happen. If you disagree at that recess ARD, then you have to take action, because if you disagree and do nothing, the school gets to do what they feel is most appropriate. So a lot of times parents will say, oh, well, I disagree, but they did what they wanted. And my question is, what did you do once you disagreed? Did you use your procedural safeguards? When you use your procedural safeguards, complaint, mediation, or due process, the first thing that the Texas Education Agency does is they tell the school to go have a resolution meeting with the family. Things almost always get worked out there if everybody's reasonable and willing to work together and compromise. At that point, once you've done that, the school knows that you know your rights, you know, because I think that's a big problem, is a lot of times we just accept what they say because we don't really know all our rights. And, you know, we want to trust them, but schools are overwhelmed. There's teacher shortages. There's money shortages. And so it is a very difficult time. So you really have to learn to be a good advocate for your child, because that's what's going to get your child what they need. And remember, it's not about what we want. It's about what's appropriate for our students to make appropriate progress and learn and become productive members of the community. These are some other books and another handout with the links. Be sure and email Judy or drop a message if you'd like to receive the slide deck and the video. And we also have videos of other topics that we've done. And some of them a lot of them we will repeat again, and we try to have at least one a month in English and in Spanish. So next slide. Please be sure and complete the survey, because the survey helps us when we're writing to get grants to continue the training that we do. So please, please, please do the survey. And I know a lot of times Judy puts it in the link, in the chat box, or you can use that QR code. Sorry, my allergies are terrible today. Judy, you're on mute, but I know you might want to say something too.
Yes, thank you so much. And thank you for that great information, Leslie. I appreciate it. I am going to put the survey link in the chat box. As we mentioned, this is a grant-funded program. And just like you want data on your child for the school to make their decisions and to work with you on making those decisions, our grant funders want data to make sure that you learned something, that you enjoyed it, And we encourage you to please complete that survey. One question I do have for the person who is iPhone, I'm not sure who you are, so if you could please give me your name, I would really appreciate it. And then Jessica, I think you're still on this call. Yes, Jessica Pasmino. I need some information from you as well because our grant funders want the data. So if you could please answer my questions, I would appreciate that as well. So I'm so glad that you all joined us. I don't think I have any questions. Would anyone like to unmute themselves and ask a question? Or you can private message Leonella, Leslie, or myself if you don't feel comfortable asking. Deidre, I see that you want the slides. No problem. I will send those to you.
And Rachel
And-
has her hand raised.
Oh, Rachel. Hello, Rachel. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, towards the end when you were talking about at the ARD meeting, if you disagree, you need to make a plan to come back. And that usually it's 10 days. I did have an ARD meeting recently and I disagreed and I said I would like an independent evaluation. But there was I didn't know that we were supposed to have a date to come back and they just said that they had to talk about it and reach out and discuss it. But there was no like closure, I guess there was.
Yeah.
So that I
Yeah.
was do that.
And maybe because, well, they pretty much have to grant you an IEE. They have to grant you an IEE at their expense, or they have to take you to due process to prove that their evaluation is good. Well, it's a lot cheaper to allow you to get an IEE at their expense than it is to take you to due process. So they almost always allow. So I would definitely follow up. You just want to make sure that you did check disagree and you let them know. Did they put that in the minutes? Because you don't want to leave the ARD meeting without everything, a copy of that meeting, because you didn't table the ARD, you disagreed. So that ARD meeting was completed. But yeah, anytime that you end in disagreement, they're supposed to schedule a 10-day or more recess ARD. Now, like I said, it could be, y'all might all talk about it and say, okay, well, we don't want to come back to the table until we have the information from the IEE. That would be the smart thing to do.
I think I might have messed up though, because when I went to sign that I disagree, they said I need to sign that I agree because they agreed to talk about the IE.
Oh, no.
Did I get tricked?
Well, here's what I think you should do. Follow up with an email and say, I just want to make it clear, and have it documented that I disagreed with the evaluation and I requested an independent evaluation at the school's expense. There's letters in that IDEA handbook. The link was on there. I don't know if you have that. I like it because it has sample letters that you can use and kind of alter to help you write your email and say, it's my understanding that if I request an IEE, that it has to be done and you need to provide me, you want to say it in the nicest way possible, with their parameters. So they're going to say, okay, it has to be done by probably an LSSP or a diagnostician or whatever, depending on what piece of the evaluation they're doing. And the person has to be within a certain mile radius and they have to be willing to contract with the school for payment. So what school district are you in?
Cy-Fair.
Cy-Fair, yeah. So I would just send that and copy. So you want to send it to, at least 3 people, the principal, the diagnostician, maybe the teacher, or if there was a special ed chair, copy them on it and say, I just want to make it clear that I did not agree with the evaluation are the services and/or the services that were based on the evaluation. I was told I had to sign agree, but now I don't think that was right because I did not agree. Just make it clear. Please let me know when you're going to provide me with the information on setting up an independent educational evaluation at the school's expense. It's my understanding that they'll probably give you a list. You don't have to pick from that list, but you do have to have somebody with the appropriate credentials. They don't want to pay travel expenses, so they don't want you having somebody from Dallas or Austin. And then but they have a paper. They know about that.
They do. And you also want to make sure that you get the approval first rather than going to get the independent evaluation and then saying, okay, I want you to reimburse me now.
Yeah.
We do have another question that was sent to me that I want to ask. I have a question about a service and of course it's okay. We're happy that you asked. My daughter has speech therapy once a week in a group setting for 30 minutes. I don't think that's enough for her to make progress. Can I ask for one-on-one therapy or more time in a group? You said in a group one, but I think you mean in a group setting. So just know, Mom, that you can always ask for more. What you want to make sure, depending on when your next ARD meeting is, or even if it's not, send a letter, as Leslie mentioned, to the teacher, to the speech therapist, and the assistant principal, and explain to them that you believe your daughter needs more speech therapy. And maybe you need to have another meeting to discuss it. That would be up to you as far as how you want to approach that. But I would definitely send an email telling them that you do not feel it is enough. I know that would not have been enough for my son.
Yeah, so remember, all services are based on the evaluation. So when's the last time your child had a speech and language therapy evaluation? And so when Cameron had his first one, they wanted to give 30 minutes of group, and I'm like, that doesn't sound right to me. I don't think that's appropriate. I think he needs to learn things in isolation and then maybe have 30 minutes in group so he can, expand on what he learned in isolation or whatever. So I think I want to ask for an independent evaluation for speech therapy. And they were like, oh, well, let's see what we can do. So I didn't get an independent evaluation because once I said that, they said, oh, I think we can work something out. Let's do 30 minutes twice a week. And the first 30 minutes is going to be one-on-one. And then the second 30 minutes is going to be in a small group. So everything's negotiable. Okay. Everything's negotiable. And using the independent evaluation is one way, because they know if you go get an independent evaluation that it's probably going to show that your child needs more. But I would keep in mind, we had very good speech therapists.
Oh yeah, I had really great ones.
Yeah.
And keep in mind though, just because an outside speech therapist may say, Johnny would benefit from 2 or 3 sessions a week, doesn't mean the school is going to get it or is going to
Right.
give it to you, but they at least have to consider it.
Yeah, they do. And another thing too is we had some really good speech therapists and we had some really bad ones too. But if you have insurance that will pay for outside speech therapy, that's very helpful, like that you would do outside of school too, because it's going to probably be one-on-one and much more intensive if you can swing that with your insurance. But definitely try for more. And if they're not willing to give it, then you can always ask for an IEE. And there is a difference in educational need and medical need. So you
That's exactly what I was going to say. Yeah.
that balance. Yeah.
And what Leslie means by that is, like, my son would have benefited from occupational therapy. He received it when he was in the ECI program, early childhood intervention. And he got it for a very limited time when he was in the younger grades in elementary school. But as he aged, the school explained, "Oh, I love seeing your son. Thank you. Hi there." The school explained it was not educationally relevant. You know, you have to
Sometimes it
pick your
is with
battles.
yeah,
Yeah,
you have to
you
pick your
have to pick your
battles.
battles. You're not going to get everything. So I just let it go because my focus was the social skills. And that's what I really wanted a lot of as well.
Right. I
So,
think you need to really key in on things that are going to make the biggest difference in their life,
mhm.
especially if you have a child like mine. Um, you know, communication, appropriate behavior. Behavior is a big thing. You know, if your student doesn't have their behaviors under control and they're 18 or 21, their options are going to be very limited as an adult. So schools have lots of resources to help with behavior. They have BCBAs, licensed school psychologists. You know, you can have a functional behavioral assessment and have a good behavior intervention plan. So definitely get those behaviors under control when they're little. My son's 6'2" and weighs 195. So he would not be still living with us if we didn't get his behaviors under control. And I was doing a lot of things wrong, and the behavior specialist really helped us. And now he's just happy, and not that he's perfect, but you know, we
He
don't.
is. He's your son.
He's a
I
sweet
also
boy.
put in a couple of websites that Leslie and I both talked about. Texas Project First, as she mentioned, it's very user friendly. It's in both English and Spanish, and it explains your rights as a parent regarding special education. Leslie and I, Leonella, our caseloads are so heavy. If you have a question and you need it answered, you can always reach out to spedtex.org. You can live chat with them, you can email them, you can call them. They will answer your questions as well. A lot of them are former school administrators. So they can be a great resource as well.
I call them all the time if I don't know something,
Mhm.
because you know the law
Yep.
is very gray. It's not black and white.
Absolutely. And we can't remember everything. And what you can always do is print off what they send you and bring it to your ARD meeting or show it to the school and say, this is what I received from SpedTex. And if they say, who's SpedTex? Ask them to go to their website and they should know about them.
They should know. And another thing too, like if you're not making any progress with your campus, you know, you want to remember to do things in writing. Email is fine. And if, you know, you're like, I know, Rachel, I told you what to put in an email. Make sure and ask for an answer back in writing. And if they don't answer back, you're going to resend that and say, below is my email that I sent a week ago. And you're going to copy somebody above the head. Don't be afraid to reach out to the district special education staff. It's all on the special education. It's all on the school district's website under special education. You should be able to find their emails. If you're not, reach out. I can help you do that. A lot of times, if you copy somebody higher up at the district office because you're not getting a response or you're not getting an adequate response, once they see you've copied somebody at the district level, a lot of things will change. And of course, we always want to be nice and try to work with them, but we
Absolutely.
want to be assertive and don't just say, don't give up, you know. And I know it's a full-time job. When Cameron was little, I did not work, you know, keeping up with him in the IEP and making sure his services were right. That was a full-time job, so I know it's
Mhm.
very hard when people are working too. And we all do the best we can and always look forward and not backwards, because I could look back and think of all the things I did wrong, but we just
I
get
do
better
that all the
each day.
time. Yep, can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. And it's really, really hard. But yeah, we do want parents to work collaboratively with schools. And, you know, schools are going through so much change right now. They're under so much pressure, and it's very, very difficult for them. We know they're doing the best they can. And there's teacher shortages, there's nursing shortages, there's therapist shortages. We understand that. However, at the end of the day, the child needs to receive those services and supports in the least restrictive environment.
And I think the parents that know their rights are the ones that are going to get that for their child, because
Right.
I mean, that's not going to be the case on every campus. There are great campuses and educators out there, but the more you know, I think, the more you're going to get. And just being nice and say, well, what if, could we do this? Or maybe I need to have an independent evaluation because I really don't feel like the services you're going to provide based on your evaluation are going to meet their needs. So you can do it in a nice way and still be assertive.
I want to be respectful of everyone's time. Please, please make sure that you complete the survey. We thank you so much for joining us and have a great rest of the evening.